Morning everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to paint a sunset and water in watercolour. So there's a few horses here and a nice image. So first of all we're going to deal with the sky and then we're going to come down and deal with the water and I'm going to show you a technique on how to paint over these horses so you don't have to paint around them. So in the first instance we need to mix up some colour for the sky, and what we're going to do is we're going to do wet in wet sky, but we're only going to look at the colours that are effectively behind this sort of hazy tone here. So we're looking at the colours that are in this strip and around the sun here. So we'll do it in 2 layers and we'll let them dry in between. Okay, so we want a yellow, and paintbrush is running away, and a sort of pale orange colour. So first of all I'm going to mix up the yellow, and I'm going to use Gamboge yellow, mainly because it's got a sort of golden tone to it. And it's a lovely colour to use for sunset particularly. And then the orange colour I'm going to use, I'm going to wipe my brush off, I'm going to pick up some orange and I'm just going to mix a little bit of orange with a tiny bit of rose madder, or if you haven't got rose madder, alizarin crimson. If you haven't got orange, then mix cadmium red with cadmium yellow and that will give you an orange colour. So to repeat that, I've mixed orange with a little bit of rose madder. That's just to give it a slight pinky orange tone. And then we've got Gamboge yellow. Okay, and you want to mix up quite a lot of those colours. So now I'm going to take, I like using these Chinese brushes for wash brushes, but if you've got something like this, this is a large square brush or even a wash brush, then use that. I'm going to use the water that I used to just clean the brush off between the yellow and the orange. So you may see a bit of colour in it, but actually no, it's not showing up too much. So we're just going to paint this all the way, this water, all the way down to the horizon line. I roughly sketched out where the horizon was and where the ponies were going to sit before I started, and I've taped a border down and taped it to the surface of the table so it doesn't move around. If you've got a block, a watercolour block or something like that, then you don't need to worry about that too much. So we're just going to put in a little bit of this yellow around the area where the sun is, like that. Doesn't have to be precise, we just want a sort of intense yellow in that area. And then I'm going to pick up the rest of the colour and I'm just going to put it on the rest of the sky. So, and let it just run around and settle where it wants to settle. If you want to strengthen it in areas, then you can. You want to pop in a little bit more rose madder or even a bit of orange into this stripe here that's going to appear at some point, then do that. It's only going to show through round there really, isn't it? I'm just going to intensify it a little bit around here. Okay, if you've got some tissue paper available, toilet roll or kitchen roll or whatever, and if you've got pools like this in the corners, then just soak them up like that. you don't have to do this, it will settle, and obviously when you frame a painting the edges are not going to show anyway. I'm just particularly concerned with that area there. Just soak it up if you feel it's going to settle a little bit too heavily. And the other thing is we've got a fairly white area where the sun is. So what I've done is I've just created a little sort of circular form here with the end of my, you can do this with a cotton bud or a coin. I've done that before with coins with my students. You wrap the coin up in the tissue and just lift off a shape like that, and you can see we've also got a little line coming out, so you can do the same thing and just use your cotton your tissue just to lift off some lines like this if you really want to be precise about how this, you see how that's done now. Okay, so once you've got to that stage and you're happy, most of this is going to be covered up, so you don't need to worry about it too much. One thing I will say though is I might just put in a little bit more rose just into this area here, just to make it a little bit sort of more pinky colour in tone. Just a touch, not too strong. Just let it run around, like you can see it's running. Okay, so that's the first stage. Now, because we're going to be working on these horses, and the horses are what they call piebald horses, so they're black and white. You can do one of two things. You can either mask out the horses to reserve the whites, or you can paint the whites back in later on with some gouache. Now, these horses are not actually white. They are white, but the setting sun has turned the tone on their white areas to a grey tone. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. I'm just going to paint the water in and paint over the horses, and you'll see that how that will work later. Okay, I'm just going to, just 1 second, I just need to press my my charger in because it's not charging and I don't want this film to run out. So while you're here, you might as well do the base, the sea or the estuary, I think they're standing in here. So you can see the paint that was here will run down into that area there, so don't worry about that. That's all going to add to the tone of the paper. But we do need some nice yellow along here, so I'm going, now this is quite bright, you can see, but it will lighten. So I'm working with that gamboge again. I've just cleaned my brush off and I've dried it off slightly. I'm just going to run my brush again along that line just to soften it. Can you see? And I'm just going to bring whatever excess paint I've got down into the area where the horses are standing. No reason why you shouldn't put any down the bottom as well if you want to. Right, so this wants to be quite pale, so I'm going to leave that as it is. So what we need to do now is just look at, oops, got some bits on there now, this bit here. So I'm going to put some yellow directly underneath the where the sun is coming down, joining up with these horses. Okay, again you can strengthen as long as this the paper is still wet. You can afford to put some extra colour in if you want to. Bit of orange. I'm going to pick up what was in the sky actually. I'm just going to put a little touch of orange in there, maybe a bit of orange, direct orange on either side of that, about that area there. I'm not going to go in too tightly with it because I want it to be light in tone, and it should get lighter and lighter as it comes away from the main area. Okay, and again we've got a little bit of lightness in the middle of that area. So we're just going to take our tissue again, form it into a line, and we're just going to put it down the middle, try and get it directly underneath the where the sun is. Just going to pop it down. It's actually worked quite nicely in that area there. Maybe a bit more just in there. Just be careful with your line making, that it's quite sort of vertical. Okay, so that's the first stage. I'm going to leave that to dry, and then I'm going to put actually this might be dry enough now. Yeah, so actually we can work straight on. I'll just have a little sip of tea. Are we still okay? Yeah, I think we are. Okay, right. So the next colour is to mix up this sort of purple grey colour here. So I'm going to take, eek, sorry about that, my extension cable just fell off, but that's okay. Right, so take a little bit of purple. If you've got purple, that's great. If you haven't, then mix up some ultramarine and some alizarin crimson together, and you'll get a purple colour. And we want the purple because obviously the sky is blue. Oops, sorry, I keep knocking that. The sky is blue, and as it sets, it takes up a little bit of warmth. So we want the purple in the grey. I've mixed a little touch of Payne's grey into the colour because we want to start off, if you can see at the top here, it's going from an orange tone into a purple tone and then into a grey blue tone. So I've just got a purple mix here that I'm going to mix up. I've still got some of my orange tone there, so I'm not worried about. So I'm going to wash my brush off, and I'm going to go into this orange. We've got this orange, if you remember, rose madder mixed with orange at the top. So you'll see the colour when it goes down on the paper. Orange mixed with rose madder. Okay, now because this is wet, this was done wet in wet, we're going to use some clean water now, and we're going to put another layer of water, but only on the top section of that paper. And we've got to be ultra careful here because we don't want to disturb what's underneath, right? So lay your water down, don't rub it, right? It will move a little, the work that's underneath, but not a great deal if you're careful, right? So water on, like so, right? Don't fuss, don't rub, don't put too much water on. This might take some practice. If you need practice, then have a go on another piece of paper. So I'm going to pick up that rosy colour, and I'm going to start working that in along the top section. You can see that that is lovely. I'm going to put a little bit of orange into it, and I'm going to work that all the way down into that watery area like this. All right, and then I'm going to take the purple. I'm going to start putting that in. However, just put a touch around here like that, just a touch, and then start lower down, leave a gap and start lower down, and then break it up. Right, so just work on this edge really, and this edge, leaving a gap in the middle. I'm just going to dry my brush off because I've got a little bit too much water in this section here. I'm just going to lift a bit off like that, can you see? Right, okay, and the water on the edge I'm just going to soak up with my brush like that. Okay, now so we've got, it's all wet. I'm going to pick up a little bit more blue and add it into the purple. That's ultramarine blue, and I'm going to work in some ultramarine blue down, ultramarine blue purple mix down this bottom area here, and work it upwards like this, side to side, work it upwards like that. Don't go into this middle section just yet, just work above and below, right, like so. You can see that, and it'll soften as you're going along, right? Again, if you've got some tissue and it's pooling on you, then just pick up a little bit of tissue and just lift it, dab it off a bit. Bit more blue, bit more purple. I'm just going to work into this area here. Okay, like that. Okay, I've lost a bit of my sun, so I'm going to take the tissue again. I'm just going to pick up that water that's around that sun. That's revealing what was underneath. Okay. Like that. You can see I've got a little bit of a pool there happening, so I'm just going to pick up that as well. Right, okay. Right, darkening it up a bit. I need to put a little bit more purple and a bit more blue down the bottom area, just to darken a little bit of grey in it, I think, just to darken this area up a bit more, and it comes all the way across like that. Just darken, particularly this side up here, just darken it up, backwards and forwards strokes, a little bit more colour. Same again. Oops, I need some more purple in that. Yeah. Same again. Ooh, that's nice. Right, okay, so that might be more the colour that we're after. Backwards and forwards strokes, not going over the sun bit. Backwards and forwards strokes, and hoping that it hasn't yet. Into that central section, I'm going to put a little bit more red. So, oops, let's get this a bit redder here. And I'm going to use the water that was underneath it to control that red, so I can go over this section as well. Be careful around that sun. It's getting a bit muddy in there. Let me just get some more tissue. Let me just drain this up a bit. Don't be frightened of doing this, especially in this area. Right, okay. A little bit more red in this area here, just so it stays nice and vivid. Don't be scared of putting this in, but try not to rub it too much so that you don't disturb what's underneath. A little bit of orange, I think, as well, just in those areas there. I'm going to make it a little bit brighter so that you can see what's going on here. And if you like the strength of colour, then put some in yourself, you know. But just you can make it slightly lighter or darker according to whatever you feel. Such a lot of pigment on that brush. Like that. Okay. Bit of red, I think. So we're sort of working, it's starting to dry off on us, and we're working now sort of almost wet on dry here. Just picking up a little bit of that rose madder. I'm just going to put it in certain areas here, just to give it a little bit of luminosity in that area. Again, just be careful with how you do it, like that. And speed is the issue here, as to whether you can get enough in that section in time before it dries out. Just going to put a touch of yellow in there, I think. Just around that edge where it's a bit wet, like that there. Okay, now, so back into that purple tone, and we're just going to work in some darker areas over this area here. So purple, blue and Payne's Grey if you've got it. If you haven't got Payne's Grey, then use ultramarine mixed with black. So we've got some lines coming across here, so I want to get those lines in before this dries off this section. Get some lines in there like that before it dries off. So backwards and forwards motions like this. There we go. You can strengthen up a bit of purple if it's going more purple like this, or you can put a bit of blue in on that side if it's sorry, I just picked up purple, if you need more blue. So get it, and we've still got enough water on this piece of paper to allow us to do this. Just going to work into this area here. So up here is a little bit darker, like that, and then we're going to come down and stretch that out a little bit, and we're going to work into this. Now it's drying off, we can work into this area here. So just look very carefully how it's formed, and just leave gaps like this. I'm going to come down here, get rid of a bit of that pool that's built up, and you can see how I'm just leaving some gaps. Sorry, I keep knocking the wire. Just leave gaps here and there, and you'll get that sort of broken thing going on like that. And in, you can see how it's sort of drying off really light. So if you're struggling with the drying part of it, then you can re-wet it again. Just keep working in like that. Dragging this colour out is a good idea, especially down the bottom. Okay, I think we're more or less, I think what I'd like to do is put a little bit more orange up in that top area here. Just a touch more orange, using that pool of water that's down like that. Touch more orange, and we're going to darken that up in a minute once it's sort of run out. Actually, we could do with some colour in that section. Let's just pick up some orange and put that in between those bits like that. There we go. Let's get in there. Bit of red maybe. That's that rose madder colour that I was talking about. Just to bring up some sort of strength in the colour. Got a bit over there into that top section. Maybe under there a bit. And maybe over here a bit. I'm making my own version here of what we're looking at the photograph, because it's a photograph. You're making a painting, you're not making a photograph, so always remember that. Going into back into that purple and oops, maybe a bit dark, that purple, blue and Payne's grey mix, just to give this a little bit more darkness down this section here, like that. Just need to lift it a little, like so. And we can use that in strength. Maybe a bit lighter though, a bit more purple in it as it comes up here. There's a bit that goes all the way across there, isn't there? And a bit that comes down. And a bit that goes down and comes into that section there. Again, it's still wet, so I can still keep working into this area here. Working in. I can always go back in and define this a little bit more if I want to later on. Just going to put a little bit of darkness just on this side here. Again, using those backwards and forwards motion marks. But I do want to get the tones right in these areas first, because you can't really go back and do that. So I'm just going to leave that there, I think. Let me just clean my brush off. And let me just see if I can bring... So you've got a wet, damp, so you've wiped it off on your tissue. I'm just going to see if I can lift off a little bit of lightness there. Can you see how that worked? So what that's doing now is it's revealing the sort of tone that was underneath that area. So just lift it away, but clean your brush off each time so that you get a light tone. Otherwise it looks like it's being massaged in almost. Anyway, right, okay, I'm going to leave that. All right, so you can more or less repeat what's going on down here. So we've got a line of trees here all the way along the horizon. So you can leave a gap or you can just paint into it. I normally just paint into it. I'm just going to try and get rid of a little bit of this mark that has been created here before I do that. So I've just wet it. I'm just going to take my tissue and I'm just going to soak that area back up. And what that should do is it should lift the purpley bit off a little bit, and it should make that less intense for when I come and put my yellow back in. So I'm going to put some yellow in now. Right, so yellow. Actually, first what we need to do, no, we'll work wet on dry with this. Right, so yellow. This is the Gamboge yellow. We're just going to put a nice flash all the way across. And we're going to soften it slowly like that. All right. You can lift this stripe out again in a minute. Again, just soften it in. We're going to pick up some orange and we're just going to put it directly underneath, like that. Again, soften it in. And then we're going to go into this rose madder colour. Doesn't matter if you have gaps like that, it will help with the final result. So we're into this again. Again, we're working wet on dry here. That was wet in wet. It's just going to give us a slightly different feel to the water, which will separate it from the sky. So into here, we've got some of this purple, like that. We're going to drag that all the way across there, like that. Purple mix again is purple and a little bit of blue and a bit of grey if you want to, but I think that just the purple in this section will be nice. So drag it all the way across again. All the way across. Like that. And then once we've got the purple in, we can start moving into the more pinky tone. So we're back into that rose madder colour, like this. Now you can do one of two things here. You can either spend time lifting off some of the highlights. We must lift off that area though again. So again, roll up your, this is a repeat, roll up your tissue and dab it into this area here, just to reveal like that. And you can also go across that area if you really want to with the tissue. Just be careful. That's it, like that. Okay, so you can dab off with a paper towel, lines like I'm doing here. Just make sure that you start again with another section like this, and keep your lines horizontal. It's really important that you keep your lines horizontal, otherwise you'll end up with some strange looking sea that looks like it's sort of tipping off the paper. So just be careful. So you can see how successful that is with picking off the lines. Yeah. The other thing is you can just do that with a brush. So you can take a thin round brush, something like that, and just lift off. So use clean water, slightly damp brush, and you can just go in and lift areas like that. Can you see? Every time you make one stroke, wash it off again. Dry it off with your paper towel and lift. Clean, dry, and lift. It's not as successful as the paper towel because the paper towel is very absorbent, but it is something that you can do either before or after you have done your water. All right, so you can even put some more of these in when you've finished your horses. So it's not something that needs to be all done at once. Okay, so that's that bit. I'm going to put the horses in and I'm going to add extra colour into this area once I've done that, mainly because I want to be able to see the structure of the horses in there to begin with. All right, before I do that, I'm going to put a line of trees in. So I'm going to use, what shall I use for that? If I use a bit of blue, because they're in the distance and they would be hazy, and a bit of Payne's grey, right? And I'm just going to, small round brush, I'm just going to pop them, and it's quite nice that some of the paper is still wet, okay, and that some of those marks, keep your line of your horizon straight though, but some of those marks will run into the water which will create a sort of natural reflection anyway, so that's good. So they come all the way across like that, and they go almost to the horizon line, almost to the horizon. So just put them in very lightly. This colour does dry off slightly lighter than it's going on, so just remember that. Anything with Payne's grey mixed into it will dry lighter. I'm just going to put a touch of water just underneath here so that it runs into the water area. Just a touch of water, just to make it, encourage it to run down a little bit like that. And you can even push it down with your paintbrush like so. Okay, we deal with this area here. I'm just going to rub that purple tone in a bit, and I'll sort that out in a little while. Okay, so I'm just going to let that dry off. It needs to be thoroughly dry before we do the next section, so I'll film that separately. Okay, so have a look at the slide, and then we'll do the next bit.